I think I've said, hello, Congresswoman and Congressman 10 times this morning to different people, so just to cover myself here. We, the New England Council, decided just a couple of weeks ago to say, the Congressman Cicilline has been so good to us over the years, and we ought to say thank you to him and invite constituents and friends and supporters of his to a breakfast, and that's the purpose of this morning. Because I don't think people get thank yous. They just move on, and I think we ought to take a moment to say, well done, thank you for all that you've done, and that's really the purpose here today. So, one of David Cicilline's biggest fans, I don't know if there's anyone bigger, Arthur Petrosnelli, said, boy, Organicogenesis, put us in. We'd love to sponsor. And I said, very, very generous. And he said, he's done so much for our state. So that's our sponsor here this morning. So we just want to say thank you. And the CEO is here. I don't know if Arthur told him that Organicogenesis was paying for this morning, but the CEO is here, Gary Gilhardini. And I just want to say thank you to Gary for his generous support. And, the New England Council, we've been on a whirlwind in the last couple of days. We just had the governor of Massachusetts speak yesterday with some 500 people. We had Governor Sununu speak last week. We had Senator Jack Reed speak. We had 2 members of Congress speak. That's all in the last couple of days, so it's really been busy. But as I said, that we are, the New England Council, we're only as good as our members, and so many people here today are members. I just want to say thank you for your support. The next couple of weeks, we have some of the colleagues of Congressman Cicilline speaking to the New England Council, Congressman Bill Keating, Congressman Stephen Lynch, and Annie Custer in New Hampshire. So look forward to getting those invites. Our Washington event will be coming up May 10th and 11th, and we have over 200 people already signed up. Congressman always makes a point to be there, and we're hoping that he may have an opportunity maybe to introduce a new colleague of his at a breakfast in Washington. So with that, we'll send you some more information, but it's going to be a great 2 days. So we hope you will come, because you'll hear from people from Congress and the Senate, the White House, and media people. It's just an extraordinary opportunity to hear what is going on in Washington. So with that, I'm going to ask Arthur, because Arthur has an awful lot of friends here that he wants to introduce, and I'm going to ask Arthur to now take the mic. You can sit right here.
Sit right where you.
Yeah, okay, you sit right here.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Everybody knows Arthur.
Welcome to the New England Council, and I just want to first thank the staff of the New England Council, Margaret, and Griff, and people.
Pauline, Larry,
Larry,
Griff, Ashley,
okay. And that put on this breakfast. And we were at Maura Healy's yesterday, just absolutely an outstanding event. And a special shout out to my friend Larry Zabar for helping me put this breakfast together. Thank you, Larry. Sitting right next to me is Mr. New England Council, Jim Brett. And we had a experience, the Organogenesis team, a couple of weeks ago. We went to Jim's late mother's breakfast, the Mary Brett Food Pantry breakfast in Dorchester. And it was just an absolutely outstanding event. And people see Jim as the president of the New England Council, but the support of his community, the people around him, his wife going back and forth, the Brett family, it was just an outstanding event, and I just wanted to recognize you with that. He's not going to say that, but we were there, and Governor Maura Healy was there, Mayor from Boston, Michelle Wu, Congressman Lynch, Congresswoman Presley, with so many others. And it's a tribute to Jim's mother, Mary Brett, which the food pantry's named, but it's really a tribute to Jim and his family. So I really want to recognize you for that.
All right, now we gotta do him. Now we gotta do Cicilline and all your friends. Okay.
So I want to recognize and from the Organogenesis family, our president and CEO, Gary Gohini, Chief Operating Officer, Patrick Bilbo, and Vice President of Health Policy, Antonio Montecalvo. And for those who don't really know, that Organogenesis is, our headquarters is in Canton, Massachusetts, and we have around 400 employees there, and several from Rhode Island.
400.
And nationally, we're around 1,000 people, and we have locations in La Jolla, California, Alabama, Birmingham, and now in St. Petersburg, Florida. And basically, Organogenesis is really a leader and a pioneer in regenerative medicine, wound care, and it's focused and development on manufacturing and commercialization of solutions for advanced wound care and surgical and sports medicine markets. And we at Organogenesis feel that we are the pioneers in wound care and development and commercialization. And the biggest thing is patient treatment. And with cell therapy products, we have treated over, in counting, 1 million patients that have benefited from cell therapy. And I just want to go over a product, and it's called Aplograph. And it was really the first product of Organogenesis, and it was out of the MIT lab. And what is cell therapy? When people have wounds, diabetic foot ulcers, things like that, and they just don't live with them for like a week or a month, but years. And I know everybody's having breakfast, but if I were to show you a wound, you would be taken back. And people live with them for years. Our products actually save lives. If a wound is not actually treated, it will lead to an amputation. And from the amputation, your life expectancy diminishes. So that's how important Organogenesis is and our products. And basically, we're based in Canton, like I said, but we're a stone's throw away from Rhode Island, and we think Rhode Island, with its great academic and healthcare institutions and existing biomanufacturing and many new medtech startups, and really, Rhode Island plays an important role in the future of the New England life sciences ecosystem. And we know that Governor McKee's administration and the congressional delegation is committed and supported for growing this. So we thank you, and thank you for this time. We're going to transition. Usually we have a Jim speaks with Congressman Cicilline in a talk, but before then, it's my pleasure, and we've invited some special guests. Since it's Congressman Cicilline's last official New England Council breakfast, we invited newly to his position, and I have to say, I would run into Congressman Magazino, whether it's on a plane down to Washington or at an event, and he would always say, you know what, whatever you need from me to support Organogenesis, please let us know. And this is before he was elected. So it's with great pleasure to introduce Congressman Seth Magazino.
Thank you, Arthur. And thank you all for having me this morning. I am here to offer my thanks and my gratitude and praise for my colleague for at least a little while, David Cicilline. I used to think, because David, as we all know, is the hardest working person in Rhode Island. You see him everywhere. You see him at every event, at every meeting. I used to think that David had a twin that he wasn't telling us about. But now that I've spent some time in Washington, I know that it's actually triplets, because in Washington, just like here, he is everywhere. He works hard. He has the respect of our colleagues. He has built himself into someone who people in Washington go to for advice and for leadership, which is no surprise for any of us who know him in Rhode Island. So David has built a reputation for himself as the lead sponsor on some of the most important pieces of legislation to come through the House over the last decade. Lead sponsor of the Equality Act to guarantee equal rights for LGBTQ plus Americans all across the country. Lead sponsor of the assault weapons ban, hugely important given the rise in shootings, particularly targeting children. A lead voice on issues around antitrust, particularly in the tech sector, and the list goes on and on. But what we know in Rhode Island is that in a quieter way, David, over the last 12 years, has done a huge amount to bring resources and help back to Rhode Islanders. Millions and millions of dollars for environmental protection, for education, for infrastructure, for community spaces has come back through his office. Thousands of Rhode Islanders have been helped by the constituent services, helped with immigration issues, helped with Social Security, helped with SNAP benefits, and all manner of other things. And so it's that nuts and bolts management of a highly effective congressional office that I think has been one of the most important parts of David's legacy in Congress. Now we are all very excited to see what he does next at the Rhode Island Foundation, where we know he will do a terrific job and bring the same passion and energy and concern for everyday Rhode Islanders to his new role. So, David, it's been an honor to work with you in Congress, however briefly, and I look forward to working with you for many years to come in your new role. Congratulations.
And the congressman will be speaking to the New England Council on August 2nd. So mark the date.
Excellent. The next speaker we invited is a longtime friend of Congressman Cicilline. She was the president of the Providence City Council, and she is the lieutenant governor, and she could be the next congresswoman in the first district of Rhode Island. And it's our pleasure to introduce Sabina Matos.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you so much. Thank you, Arthur. I'm truly, it's my honor to be here because as someone who knows Congressman Cicilline since the beginning, since we started both in the city of Providence, I have seen his hard work and dedication since the beginning. I want to say it as Congressman Megastinos just said, we think that he has a double, that's for sure, and a triplet, because he's everywhere. And it's something that I have always told him is that he should teach all of us how to be an elected official, all of the politicians, because he's the best. I have told him that before, and I wanted to say this in front of all of you. And I'm pretty sure that Mayor Lombardi can attest to that, right? He has seen him working really hard. As someone that also was a mayor, he understands exactly what the cities and towns need. It's truly a pleasure and an honor for me to be here and I say thank you. Gracias. I have been watching you doing your job. I have been watching you doing it with a smartness and a dedication that I haven't seen anybody else doing it. You surprise all of us when you decide to retire. And at the beginning, I was in shock, but then when I knew you were going to the Rhode Island Foundation, I was like, that's a perfect fit. Who else but David can do that job and understand what is needed in every community of the state of Rhode Island? You really know every community. So even though we are losing you in Congress, and one of the things that I admire the most is your fight for democracy. We were talking about that earlier here. As someone that grew up outside of this country, I'm always worried about what would happen if we lose democracy. And you have been such a strong fighter for democracy. So I want to say thank you. Thank you for what you have been doing for the state of Rhode Island, for the city of Providence. You know, I got to go back to Providence and thank you. But also, I'm so looking forward to everything that you're going to do in the Rhode Island Foundation to continue working for the people of Rhode Island. So congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Now we're just going to go back to our regular session. I'm going to hand it over to Jim Brett, but it is Organogenesis' honor and my honor to actually introduce Congressman David Cicilline.
I have this.
Well, I mean, the good news is he's not leaving the state of Rhode Island. He may be leaving as your voice on Capitol Hill, but he will always be here. And I guess that's the first question, Congressman. 2020, you got over 70% of your vote, and then you cruised to re-election in 22, and then 1 month in, you made a decision to leave the United States Congress. What made you leave?
First, I want to just say thank you to Seth and to Sabina for their nice words. I only wish my mother were here to have heard that. Somebody maybe took a video, and thank you to Mayor Lombardi, another great friend. And I just appreciate everyone being here, and thank you, Jim, to the New England Council for giving me an opportunity to be here today. Look, I've loved every single day that I've served in the United States Congress. And I've been in elective office for almost 30 years, almost half my life. And when this opportunity first came to me to become the new president and CEO of the Rhode Island Foundation, initially, I thought, I have a job I love. But as I reflected and sort of studied the work of the foundation, it occurred to me that in this role, I would have an opportunity to have an even greater impact on my state, the state that I love, and all the areas that I love: healthcare, education, economic opportunity. And much like the mayor's job, kind of be able to see directly the investments you're making and the difference it's making in people's lives. And, so for me, it was sort of the perfect moment to come back to Rhode Island, to continue to work on the things that I really care about, but to do it in a place where I knew I could really get things done. And so, and I think the Rhode Island Foundation, when you think about the work they do, it's one of the oldest and largest community foundations in the country. It has a role in virtually every major public policy that happens in Rhode Island. The Rhode Island Foundation is part of that conversation. So it's in a very unique place as a community foundation. And I think the opportunity to build on the great work of Neil Steinberg and the staff of the Rhode Island Foundation and kind of bring it to the next level was an exciting opportunity I just couldn't say no to. It wasn't my plan, but I'm really excited about it.
Mm-hmm. The congressman gave a litany of all your different accomplishments and pieces of legislation. We can go into them a little more.
You can go to my website, which will be up for 2 more weeks.
Yeah. The one that really impressed an awful lot of people, I think, is that you were selected as one of the managers on the impeachment of the president. That you were so good in probing, asking good questions. But I heard from other members who were on that commission said that you worked so hard behind the scenes to be what you are, just a very effective prosecutor. You were at your best, as some members have indicated. So talk about that experience.
Well, it was a kind of sad moment, obviously, for the country, but for me, it was a moment of tremendous responsibility. On January 6th, late that afternoon, early that evening, actually started to draft the article of impeachment against the president, because I really believed, having watched the speech that morning on the Ellipse and watched all the things that led up to it, that he was responsible for the events of that day. And there was a lot of resistance. A lot of people thought, look, he's leaving anyway. He's going to be acquitted by the Senate. Why waste the time? And I felt very strongly that you just can't. So I literally, Ted Lieu came to my office, one of my colleagues from California who was evacuated from his building, and we worked on it that day. And then when the speaker asked me to serve as an impeachment manager, I was gratified, but I also felt like she had almost no choice. I wrote the article of impeachment. So, but I understood it to be a moment of incredible responsibility. I knew it was something that the country was watching, and I knew the result was likely to not be a conviction. The Senate was unlikely to convict him. But this was a moment to make sure the American people and the world knew the truth about what happened that day. And that we used every tool we had to hold the persons accountable who were responsible for it. So I think that kind of band of brothers and sisters that are impeachment managers have a bond that we will have for the rest of our lives.
You know, I think another major accomplishment that you should be very proud of, you were the chair of that subcommittee antitrust that drew an awful lot of attention, to say the least. But I think the report that you put together was like 450 pages. It was the first time there's been an investigation on the tech industry in like 50 years. So, I mean, I remember watching some of it because you brought in people like Zuckerberg and Cook from Apple. I mean, talk about that accomplishment there, because it was pretty significant.
Yeah, I mean, actually, this is one of the things I'm most proud of is antitrust is sort of back in vogue again. I think for the last 50 or 60 years, we haven't had good antitrust enforcement in this country, both in Republican and Democratic administrations. And so we've seen just this growth and consolidation in all the sectors of our economy, particularly in the tech sector, where you just have these monopolies basically in collecting all of this information about us. And so we launched, we knew that we wanted to sort of rein in big tech and figure out how this industry works. So in order to understand it fully, we thought it was important to do an actual investigation. It was the first antitrust investigation done by Congress in 50 years. I teamed up with Ken Buck, who's a very conservative Republican from Colorado. He and I literally don't agree on anything else but this one thing, antitrust. And you know, I've tried to talk about a million other things, but like there's no hope. And he's tried to talk to me about a million other things, but we worked really well together. We investigated these technology platforms for 16 months. As you said, we generated a 450-page report. We introduced 5 bipartisan pieces of legislation. We got 2 of them passed, 3 didn't. But for the first time, this is back in the discussion in the Congress of the United States about making sure we have good competition policy and that we restore competition, not just in the digital marketplace, but everywhere. And just evidence of this is when I first joined the Judiciary Committee, the Antitrust Regulatory Subcommittee was always like the last subcommittee to fill. You go by lottery. Nobody wanted to be on it, including me. And like it didn't meet. It had terrible hearings. This last time when we filled the Judiciary Committee, we had more. It was filled first, and we had more members who wanted to be on that subcommittee than all the other subcommittees. So antitrust is back in a big way, and that's good for the country. And I think it'll ultimately be good for business and for consumers and workers. But we really, I think, collectively, Ken and I really elevated the work of the Antitrust Subcommittee.
And you helped propel the first signature measure regarding election integrity. You talk about that?
In the H.R. 1 or the disclosure? Yeah. So
the first bill, H.R. 1.
Yeah. So H.R. 1, which was the first bill we passed in the Congress when we took back the House, it's the biggest kind of pro-democracy bill, at least in a generation. It included several pieces of legislation that I wrote, including the automatic voter registration and the Disclose Act. Senator Whitehouse is the sponsor of that in the Senate. And this is a bill to make sure everyone who's eligible to vote is permitted to vote and that their vote is counted. Really important bill to secure our elections. Unfortunately, because of the Senate filibuster, the Senate didn't pass it, but that fight will continue.
You must be very proud of your legislative wins to protect the LGBTQ, recognizing the marriage and intermarriage, interracial marriage, as well as codifying the marriage itself. So
yeah.
Talk about that.
So I served for the last 2 years as the chair of the Equality Caucus in the Congress, which is actually the largest caucus in the House, has the most members, which just says a lot about the Democratic Party, because I think every member of the Democratic Caucus, or almost every member, is a member of the Equality Caucus. I authored something called the Equality Act that prohibits discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity in all areas of life: housing, employment, public accommodations, jury service, and education. We passed it twice in the House with bipartisan votes. We had 2 Republicans last time and 6 the previous time, but can't get a vote in the Senate, at least not yet. But we also passed the Respect for Marriage Act into law, which the president signed, that will forever protect marriage equality in this country and interracial marriage. So that was a big achievement for our community and for our country.
And you had a big achievement on the gun violence, the assault weapons ban. That's something that hadn't passed since, what, 2005?
Yeah, I would say the area of gun violence is the area. I was a founding member of Mayors Against Illegal Guns with Mayor Bloomberg and Mayor Menino when I was mayor, and then worked on it before that when I was in the state legislature, and have worked on it a lot since I've gotten to Congress. I will say it's the area of work where we've had the least success in actually getting work done. It's one of my greatest frustrations. It's also one of the kind of cruelest ironies is that overwhelmingly the American people support common sense gun safety legislation. It's not even close. I mean, these are by, universal background checks is 95%, including gun owners. So there is a complete disconnect between the Republicans in the Congress and the country on these issues. We did pass the assault weapons ban last Congress in the House, and I'll tell you a funny story. The speaker at the time, Speaker Pelosi, was a great champion of it, but she wanted to make sure that we had the votes before it came to the floor, and she kept saying to me, David, do you have the votes for this? And I said, yes. And of course, she did the count, and she will never count Republicans. And she did the count, and we were, short 3 or 4 in the Democratic caucus. And she kept, and I said, Nancy, I have the votes. Now, one of them was a Republican who had already voted for it last time, Brian Fitzpatrick. But he said, please don't tell them I'm going to vote for it. I just can't take them descending on my office. But you have my word, I'll vote for it. There was another guy, Chris Jacobs, who sadly was in the district where there had been a shooting with an assault weapon just recently, and he had made a public statement saying he would support it. So he was my second vote. But he couldn't say publicly that he would actually vote for it. So Nancy kept saying, who's the other vote? And I couldn't tell, but I had to give her my word. Because if that came to the floor and it didn't have the votes, I would have been like. So the day of the vote, I got word from somebody that Chris was getting a little squishy. And I'm like, oh my God. I thought fast. I went up to her and I said, Chris, I didn't want to tell you till after the vote, but I'm nominating you for a Profiles in Courage Award at the Kennedy Library. Because he literally was driven out of the primary and couldn't run for re-election because of his, he's like, you are? I said, yeah, you deserve it. I figured, having told him that, I locked him in. There was no way he was going to vote against this. I will report, not only did he vote for it, but about 2 weeks ago, I submitted his nomination to the Kennedy Library because he deserves it. But I had to think fast because if I lost that vote, not only would have the bill gone down, but the speaker would have been it. So, but it never got a vote in the Senate. And it's one of the frustrating things. We have a gun violence epidemic in this country. We have more mass shootings than days in the year. We have more school shootings than we've ever had. Kids are doing active shooter drills in kindergarten. The trauma of that is, this is an epidemic of violence. It is now the single leading cause of death among young people in America is gun violence. And the idea that we have not passed a lot of this common sense gun safety legislation is a mystery to me. And I think we're going to see in the upcoming election the defeat of a whole bunch of people who stood in the way, and finally we'll have some action, because young people are just not going to continue to live in a country where they can't go to school and can't go to a movie theater and can't go to church without fear of being gunned down. So,
talk about the atmosphere when you entered Congress and the atmosphere as you're leaving now.
I would say my observation when I first entered Congress was I was really startled at the partisan nature of the place, because I came from Rhode Island where we had Republicans and Democrats in the General Assembly, and they worked together. And I think part of it was because they were the Republicans was a small group, and there was no chance they'd become the majority. So there was no disincentive to work together and pass some of their bills. And I was surprised, when I got there that it was so, there were 2 cloakrooms. One the Democrats had luncheon, and one the Republicans had didn't even have lunch together, kind of. The system unfortunately is designed so that the majority party has all of the power in the House. And so if you care about things like reproductive health care and gun safety and protecting Social Security, Medicare, and all these things, it's right to say, well, we have to make sure we hold on to the majority, because if the other party gets the majority, they're going to do different things than we want in all these areas. So it's a system, unfortunately, that I think encourages those sorts of divisions. But I would say in the beginning, there was a little more working together. I think it's gotten more difficult now. And I think I will confess, for me, I had a lot of really good friends that were Republicans that, I didn't agree with on anything. But we were friends, and I liked them, and, we, joked around and stuff. It changed a little bit after the Trump presidency, because having watched those same people who I always thought, you know what, you're a Republican, you're doing what you think is right for your district the same way I'm doing what I think is right for my district, and you're fighting hard, and I disagree with you completely. You have different environmental policy, different healthcare policy, different energy policy, whatever, but you're doing what you think is right. But then I watched that same group refuse to do anything to sort of hold the former president accountable as he was shredding our democracy and undermining institutions that have made us the envy of the world. And I have to say, I didn't look at them in the same way. I thought you remained silent during all of that. And so it changed. I mean, I still was polite. I still have some friends. But I think for a lot of them, my relationship changed a little bit because I couldn't look at them in the same way, having watched them allow that to happen to our country.
Now that you're leaving Congress, do you think that the Democrats need to change their House rules when it comes to appointing chairs? And I give the example of Richie Neal. Richie Neal is an extraordinary public servant, became chairman of Ways and Means in 18 after the election. But after 30 years of service, the current chairman, now that the Republicans are in charge, he was elected in 2013 because the Republicans have a policy. We don't abide by seniority as a criteria for chair. It's how well can you handle the job, and I think it's Jason Smith is the chairman of Ways and Means, elected in 2013 versus an outstanding public servant. 30 years it took for him to get. Do you think it's something that they ought to look at, or do you think it's the third rail? You can't.
No. What's different in the Republicans is not that it isn't that they just consider seniority. Mm-hmm. They have term limits for chairs because in our rules, it's not seniority that dictates it. It weighs very heavily, but any member has the right to run against Richie Neal. They just don't because the tradition is it's based on seniority. There have been a couple of examples. Greg Meeks is an example. He's chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He was not the most senior member. So there have been examples where people have challenged the most senior person or prevailed. But I think the real difference is the Republicans have term limits for committee chairs. And we've tried to raise that in the Democratic caucus, and that was the third rail. But the truth is, I think the caucus is changing, and I think people recognize when one party has young chairs, like Paul Ryan was the chair of the Budget Committee. He was very young. He'd been there a short period of time because term limits gives a lot more members opportunities to become committee chairs. You look at our committee chairs, they're all folks who have been around for a very long time. Most of them, in the last Congress were in their 80s. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with people in their 80s. I love seniors, but not everybody on a committee chair should be from that same generation. So I think it would be a very wise thing for the House Democratic Caucus to look at. How do you access more of the talent in our caucus by giving people more opportunities? And term limits might be one way to do it.
I mean, we have a president, 80, but we'll leave that.
80 is the new 60.
It is. I agree. How about a question or two for the congressman, or maybe something that he has accomplished on your behalf? We have a microphone right here.
Hey, Congressman, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Paul Cooney from Mutual of America. Congratulations on a great career, first and foremost. As a bit of a political junkie myself, I'm just sort of curious if you have any one or two stories that stick out as, really cool nuggets you'd want to share with the crowd.
That you can tell.
That I can tell. I would say one of the things that I've enjoyed the most about the job, particularly as a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, has been traveling. And so, as a recent example, I had an opportunity to go to Ukraine right before the invasion by the Russian Federation, like the week before, and meet with President Zelensky, and then return a couple months later to go to the Polish-Ukraine border. And So, the opportunity to kind of go to these places around the world where American participation really matters, and no matter what our view is of ourselves, we're very critical of America, it still matters a lot to people around the world that America's paying attention to whatever their challenges are. So the travel stuff has been one of the coolest parts of the job. I asked to be on the Foreign Affairs Committee when I first got to Congress, and I was lucky enough to get a spot. And part of the reason was when you're a mayor, literally you only care about your city. You don't even care about the next town. And so I thought, well, here's an opportunity to actually learn about the world. And, I realized how little I knew, and I spent 12 years really studying and learning. But there were a lot of great trips and a lot of great interactions with foreign leaders in that job that were really amazing.
Who are some of your best friends that you worked with and made as friends?
In the Congress?
Yeah.
Jamie Raskin, Bill Keating, Robin Kelly, Pramila Jayapal, Joe Neguse. You tend to work closely with members on your committees. Greg Meeks, my chairman, who's like, threatened to call the Rhode Island Foundation and say bad things about me, so I'd be fired. I'm like, it's too late. He said, well, I'm going to miss you on the trip. I said, well, pass a law that former members of Congress can come on your trips.
There you
you
go.
can fix that.
That's the rules
but
of law.
yeah, no, I've had, someone was asking me, what is the thing I'm going to miss the most? And without question, it has been the joy of working with just incredible people who are so hardworking and so dedicated to their country and to their constituents. And when you're in any job like this where you're just like going 100 miles an hour, you don't really take time to sit around and reflect on your friendships. But when you announce that you're leaving, it causes you and them to realize, oh, wait a minute, and kind of reflect on the friendship. And I have had the opportunity in the last few weeks particularly to reflect on just amazing friendships that I've made. And I'm going to work hard to maintain them, but just working with them every day is something that I'll miss a lot.
Yes, sir. Wait for the mic and just identify yourself.
Congressman David Cicilline, Mark Kuzina with Wells Fargo. I'm just curious, transitioning from mayor into becoming into congressman, how many cycles did it take for you to really have your foundation planted into the job?
I had served in the state legislature before I was mayor, so I understood the legislative process. I think the thing that took adjusting to, frankly, and we had a kind of former mayor's caucus. Jim knows this. And the adjustment was actually going from a chief executive to a legislator where, the mayor of Providence is a very strong mayor of form of government where you can say, I want, the mayor knows you want something done, it gets done. And so we were like former mayors sitting around, remember we used to have power and we could do things? Because we were elected into the minority. So in the House, when you're in the minority, you have zero power. So it wasn't just like we had less, we had none. And we would sit around and say, we could do stuff, and so that transition was really hard for the first term, and then you figure out how to work in the minority to get things done. But it was the transition really from being a mayor to being in the legislative in the minority that was the hardest. Question.
Yes, ma'am. The mic is right here. Just identify yourself.
Good morning. Donna McGowan, CEO and Executive Director of the Alzheimer's Association for the state of Rhode Island. Congressman, unfold thanks, heartfelt thanks, and I'm glad you're just going to be down the street from me now, and I don't have to travel to D.C. anymore, so that's great just to see you. But we want to thank you and the rest of the congressional delegation because we worked very hard together as a team to get NIH funding for Alzheimer's disease. 13 years ago when I started, we weren't even on the NIH funding map. Mm-hmm. And so we had a huge education process to go through, and it became a very strong bipartisan process. And I just want you to know that we've gone from zero to $3.6 billion in the last 13 years. And we also have 2 drugs approved through FDA for early onset Alzheimer's that are projecting longer quality of life. We could never have done this without you. We're just so grateful for your participation and our entire congressional delegation support. So thank you.
Thank you, Donna. And thanks for your good work.
Okay. And maybe just a final question on your successor. What advice would you give him or her in the sense of, would you say this is a committee that I'd recommend you to serve on? These are people that I think you ought to be working with on issues that I think are important.
No, well, actually, my advice to anyone who takes this job, I mean, I would happily answer any question they would ask me, but my advice would be a simple one, and that is to remain omnipresent in the district. You know, a lot of people think like, oh, as the Lieutenant Governor mentioned, I go to everything. I go to everything because I like going to things. I like being with people. But for people who have the privilege of serving an elective office, it is a constant source of information. People tell you what they're worried about, things that are happening in their lives. They tell you what they agree that you're working on. They tell you when they disagree with you. It's a constant source of information from your boss. And so I think a lot of people think of it as like an add-on, like do your job, and then if you can go to events. I consider being out in the community at events every night and every morning and every day a central part of the job because you learn every day about what you should be doing. So that would be my one piece of advice. I think many elected officials don't fully appreciate the value of that. They think of it as a burden, and maybe they'll go to something, but I consider it to be central to the job.
Well, we want to thank you for being here today, but more importantly for the service that you have given to your constituents, to the state, to New England. I know that many members of the New England delegation have already expressed to me when they heard about this time today that let him know, let the congressman know he is a huge part of the delegation. Richie Neal speaks so highly of you and Keating and just so many of them. It'll be a loss, your voice and your advocacy, but more importantly, your decency. Thanks. I mean, you fought really hard. Equity, fairness. Those are two words that come to mind when I think of you, because all your legislation revolved around fairness and equity, whether it's the big tech, guns, and so I just want to say, on behalf of the New England Council, we thank you for your service, always being available to the members of the New England Council, but more importantly, the friendship. And we have a little token appreciation. We have a clock here, the New England Council. The Honorable David Cicilline, with deep appreciation for your outstanding leadership and support given this day, April 12th. And,
thank you. It's beautiful. But we have to do a picture. Yes.
Oh, okay. I'll do that. You got a picture in front of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I might add these